What if I told you the most powerful people in history didn't rise by avoiding conflict, they rose by designing it? Not every villain they fought was real. Some were chosen, some were invented, because nothing unites a crowd faster than fear, and nothing sharpens loyalty like a common enemy. When there's no clear threat, people grow comfortable. When there's no villain, there's no hero. But once you invent the villain, you become the hero. From ancient empires to modern media, this one strategy has been used again and again. Invent the villain, control the story, and become the hero. In this video, we explore the forgotten art of narrative warfare. Why powerful people invent their enemies, and how that single illusion can create influence, control perception, and rewrite reality. Let's dive in. Part 1. The psychological power of the enemy. Why does inventing an enemy give you more power than making a friend? Because the human brain was built for survival, not peace. For most of history, being relaxed got you killed. What kept you alive was alertness, suspicion, fear. And here's where it gets interesting. The brain doesn't need the threat to be real, it just needs it to be believable. That's why when someone points at a danger, even vaguely, we react fast. We don't wait for proof. We pick a side. It's tribal, it's ancient, and it works. That's why politicians love to say things like, they're coming for your jobs. They want to destroy our values. People like them are the problem. Who's they? Doesn't matter. The ambiguity makes it stronger. Because the moment people believe there's a them, they desperately want a we. And whoever gives them that becomes the leader. Think about it. Every cult has a villain. Every protest needs an oppressor. Even brands use this. Coke versus Pepsi, Apple versus Microsoft, Android versus iPhone. We don't just follow ideas, we follow conflict. Because conflict gives us identity. It gives us direction. It gives us a reason to belong. And that is the invisible weapon. Once you control the enemy, you control the tribe. Imagine you're working in an office. Everyone's polite. The vibe is chill. Nothing to gossip about. Now imagine someone leans in and whispers, "Hey, have you noticed Karen always takes credit in meetings?" Boom, Karen becomes the villain. Suddenly, everyone's paying attention. People form little alliances. Lunch table politics begin. And the guy who whispered, now he looks like the sharp one, the leader, the one who saw the truth. That's the power of inventing an enemy. It gives people something to react to, something to fight against. And in return, it gives you power. But this trick isn't just office gossip, it's been used by emperors, revolutionaries, and billion-dollar CEOs. And in part 2, we're going to expose the masterminds, the ones who created enemies not by accident, but by design. Part 2, historical masters who created enemies. Let's get one thing straight. This isn't just a clever office tactic. This is ancient power science, from kings to cult leaders to Silicon Valley icons. The smartest minds didn't just wait for threats to appear, they selected them. Let's start with the OG of dark strategy, Niccolo Machiavelli. In The Prince, he flat out advises rulers, if you have no enemy, create one. Start a conflict, control it, and then appear as the hero who resolves it. Because the people don't care if the war was real, they just remember who won. Fast forward to Napoleon, France was divided, weak. So what did he do? He gave them a villain, foreign invaders. He stirred fear, created urgency, and suddenly he was the unifier, the protector of the people. Even modern companies use this. Steve Jobs didn't just sell products, he sold rebellion. Remember those old Apple ads? Think different. It wasn't just about computers, it was a subtle war against conformity, against the villain. Big, boring Microsoft, he made Apple users feel like rebels, and made Microsoft the faceless empire. That's the genius of it. When you create a villain, you give people someone to blame and someone to believe in. Even modern influencers do it. They say, people hated me for this. Everyone doubted me. They tried to cancel me. Whether those people exist or not, the moment you say it, you're not just a creator, you're a fighter. And suddenly, your audience becomes your army. And here's where it gets dangerous. Because once you know how to create enemies, you don't just get attention, you get control. So now you know, the greats didn't just face enemies, they designed them, like sculptors shaping shadows. But that raises a dangerous question. How do you do it without being exposed? How do you create a villain so convincing that people don't just believe in the enemy? They thank you for pointing it out. That's where the real craft begins. In part 3, we'll uncover the step-by-step formula for inventing an enemy, subtly, strategically, and without ever getting your hands dirty. Part 3: How to create an enemy without getting caught. Let's be honest, you can't just walk into a room and say, "Hey everyone, I made up a villain, let's all get mad together." That's not how real power works. The trick is to make people believe they discovered the enemy themselves. So how do you do it? It starts with ambiguity. You don't point fingers, you suggest, you drop hints, you raise questions. Instead of saying, "They're the problem," you say, "Have you ever noticed how some people are trying to destroy what we've built?" Or, "I won't name names, but there's a pattern here that's too obvious to ignore." See what just happened? You've planted the idea, but made them feel like it was theirs. And when people feel like they've uncovered a hidden threat, they become emotionally invested. Step 2: give the villain just enough shape. Too much detail and people can fact check you. Too little and it doesn't feel real. But just enough, that's when things get powerful. Say something like, "They hide behind fake smiles. They claim to care, but they're just after control. They talk about peace, but they thrive on chaos." You've created an image, a shadow, and the human brain hates shadows, so it fills in the blanks with fear. Now here's where it gets psychological. Once people are emotionally charged against the enemy, you present yourself as the calm, reasonable voice, the one offering unity, solutions, vision. You never said you hated anyone. You just wanted to protect what matters. And just like that, you framed yourself as the hero without ever lifting a weapon. It's the same trick used by cult leaders who warn of outsiders contaminating the truth, politicians who stir panic before every election, influencers who call out vague haters to build loyalty. And in case you're wondering, yes, sometimes the villain is completely fake, but the impact? Still real. Because once the enemy exists, even if it's made of fog, the tribe will fight for you as if it's made of fire. There was once a young activist who couldn't get anyone to listen. She had ideas, passion, vision, but the crowd was indifferent. No one showed up to her rallies, no one shared her message, until one day, her tone changed. She started talking about a group that didn't want change, that feared progress. She never named them, she just called them the quiet ones. "They're the ones in power," she said. "They smile to your face but pull strings behind the scenes. They want us silent, they want us afraid." Suddenly the crowd got louder. The rallies grew. People wore shirts saying, "We are not quiet." And the activist? She became a voice of the people, a symbol of courage, a leader, all because she gave the movement something to push against. An invisible wall, a villain in the mist. Was it real? Nobody knows. But it didn't matter. The fear felt real. The unity was real. And the power? Very, very real. But here's the part they never tell you. The same trick that builds empires can also burn them to the ground, because once you unleash fear, you don't always control where it goes. In part 4, we reveal the hidden risks, the chaos that comes when the enemy you created starts to feel real. Part 4, the dangers of manufactured enemies. Here's the problem with inventing a villain. Eventually people start to believe it, and once they do, they stop thinking, they stop questioning, they just react. That's great, until it's not. Because fear is a wildfire. You can light it with a match, but you can't always control the wind. History is full of leaders who built their power on imaginary threats, only to be swallowed by the monster they created. Think of cult leaders who lost control of their followers, watching their loyal believers spiral into chaos. Or politicians who stirred hatred for attention, and then got buried under the very outrage they unleashed. Even creators, influencers, or public figures. They build a brand around being attacked. But after a while, the audience needs a new enemy. And sometimes they turn on the one who led them. Because when you train people to live in fear, they start looking for threats everywhere, even in you. And here's the most disturbing part. Sometimes the fake enemy becomes real. A rumor spreads far enough and someone, somewhere, will live up to it. The outsider you warned about? He rises, not because he existed, but because you gave him life. That's the Frankenstein effect. You built a puppet, and now the strings are gone. So yes, creating an enemy works. It's powerful, it's ancient, but it's also dangerous. And if you don't know when to stop, you risk turning your story into your downfall. Imagine you're a king, and your kingdom is growing restless. No wars, no threats, just peace. Too much peace. So you release a rumor, a whisper of a snake in the garden, a traitor among them, someone plotting in secret. The people believe you, they sharpen their swords, they become alert, united, loyal. But soon they start seeing snakes everywhere. in the eyes of their neighbors, in the smile of their teachers, in the silence of their own friends. And now, they're not just protecting your kingdom, they're tearing it apart to save it. You tried to calm them, too late. You created the fear, you fed it, but now it no longer obeys you. The snake you invented, it's real now, and it bites everything, including the hand that created it. So why do they still do it? Why risk creating chaos? Why play with fire, knowing it might burn you? Because for those who understand power, the rewards often outweigh the risk. Because when it works, when the enemy is just right, the results are almost too good to ignore. In part 5, we'll reveal the hidden advantages of having a clear enemy and why some of history's most beloved heroes were only possible because of the villains they faced. Part 5, the benefits of having a clear enemy. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A villain sharpens the story. Without a threat, there's no urgency. Without a challenge, there's no momentum. Without a villain, there's no hero. This is why some of the most iconic leaders in history needed their enemies. Martin Luther King Jr. had segregation. Gandhi had the British Empire. Even Batman had the Joker. And no, I'm not saying they invented their enemies, but their influence exploded because of them. Because enemies create clarity. In a world full of noise, a visible opponent makes things simple. It turns complexity into a battle. It gives people a side to stand on and someone to follow. An enemy gives you identity. It defines your values. It makes your mission feel bigger than you. That's why brands love to position themselves against something. It's why influencers talk about proving the haters wrong. It's why political parties can't stop bashing each other. Because when you fight something, you automatically stand for something. Even in your personal life, this plays out. Sometimes the pain someone caused you becomes your fuel. The rejection becomes your story. And the person who hurt you, they become the villain that shaped your evolution. It's strange, isn't it? Sometimes your enemy teaches you more than your mentor ever could. The right enemy makes you stronger, sharper, focused, believable. It builds loyalty, fuels movements, and makes leaders unforgettable. But there's still one final twist left in this story. Because even if you never create an enemy, you might already be playing a role in someone else's narrative. So yes, creating an enemy can make you powerful. But before you go looking for one, ask yourself something darker. What if you are the villain in someone else's story? What if someone, right now, is pointing at you, framing you, blaming you, telling their audience, that's the one holding us back, and you don't even know it? You're just living your life, while in the shadows, someone's building a movement fueled by the image of you. In part 6, we're going to explore the most disturbing twist of all. How easily you can become a tool in someone else's power game without ever realizing it. Part 6, you might be someone else's enemy. Most people think they're the hero of their story, but what they don't realize is that in someone else's story, they might be the villain, not because they did anything wrong, but because someone needed them to be. It could be an ex who blames you for everything, a coworker who uses your name to climb the ladder, a politician who says people like you are what's ruining the country, or an influencer who turns your opinion into hate just to spark outrage and go viral. You didn't ask for the role, but you were cast in it. Because in a world obsessed with attention, someone always needs an enemy, and if you stand for anything, you will become one. You'll be misunderstood, misquoted, reduced to a symbol, not a person, a threat, a placeholder for whatever emotion they're trying to provoke. And here's the twist. The more real, honest, or unbothered you are, the more threatening you appear to someone who needs a villain. That's how subtle this game is. You don't have to be loud to be dangerous, you just have to be in the way. So while you're trying to build, evolve, or simply exist, someone, somewhere, might be weaponizing your name to build their own power. You've seen how others can turn you into the villain, but now ask yourself something even harder. What if the enemy was never out there to begin with? What if the most powerful and most dangerous villain you'll ever face is the one you've built inside yourself? In part 7, we're going to explore a twisted but overlooked strategy, how some people turn themselves into the enemy and use it to gain power. Part 7, the villain within, turning yourself into the enemy. Not every power move looks like strength. Sometimes it looks like self-blame. It's the strategy of the false villain, where you make yourself the problem just to gain control of the story. You've seen this before. The person who says, maybe I am the toxic one, but only after manipulating others into feeling guilty. The celebrity who says, I've made mistakes, but only after being exposed, using fake humility to soften the blow. The friend who apologizes first, not because they mean it, but because now you look like the unforgiving one. It's a subtle power play. Claim guilt before it claims you, and control how people see your fall. This tactic works especially well in modern culture because audiences love redemption stories. They love the villain who learned their lesson. They love the suffering hero more than the confident one. So by turning yourself into the enemy, carefully, publicly, just enough, you can manipulate attention, dodge consequences, and look more human without actually changing. Even in relationships, this plays out. Ever had someone twist an argument by saying, "You're right, I'm just the worst, I ruin everything"? Suddenly, you're on the back foot. Now you're the bad guy if you don't comfort them. That's not self-awareness, that's emotional control dressed as vulnerability. And here's the deeper layer. Some people internalize this pattern so deeply, they don't even know they're doing it. They sabotage themselves. They carry guilt that isn't theirs. They make themselves small because somewhere along the way, they learned that being the villain gets more love than being the threat. And in trying to win affection, they weaponize their own weakness. Conclusion. Power doesn't always wear a crown. Sometimes it wears a mask, points at shadows, and lets the crowd do the rest. You've seen how enemies are made, not just in war zones or palaces, but in conversations, relationships, and even inside our own minds. So here's the question. Have you ever been turned into the villain unfairly? Or maybe you caught yourself casting someone else in that role? Let me know in the comments. And if you want more insights like this, darker, deeper, unfiltered, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.